former president and the candidate for the presidency of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, heads a campaign rally where he officially launches his candidacy for the government of the Brazilian state of Ceará. In Bolivia, social movements gathered in the Unity Pact announced that they will call for countermarches in blockades if pressure's actions from Santa Cruz persist. Supporters of Al-Muqtada stormed in Iraq's parliament on Saturday for the second time this week in a deepening political crisis. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. This Saturday, the former president and candidate for the presidency of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, heads a campaign rally where he officially launches his candidacy for the government of the Brazilian state of Ceará. The activity started at 11 o'clock local time this morning, and it takes place at Fortaleza's event center. Hermano de Freitas was introduced as the candidate for the government of Ceará and the former governor Camilo Santana as senator of the republic. According to the sources, the credentials were handed out 9 o'clock in the morning in a previous act in which the candidates met with former President Lula. The event was part of the beginning of Lula da Silva's campaign, who, according to the polls, leads the voting intention for October's elections in the country. Brazil's health ministry confirmed the South American nation's first death related to monkeypox. In a press conference, the Ministry of Health Executive Secretary Daniel Pereira said the victim was a man living in the state of Minas Gerais who had low immunity, other relevant comorbidities, and a history of chemotherapy treatment. The cause of death provided was septic shock aggravated by monkeypox. Brazil has so far registered more than 1,000 cases of monkeypox in 16 cases, mostly Sao Paulo.
The Ministry of Health has been notified about one death related to monkeypox. It's a patient with other relevant comorbidities and a history of chemotherapy treatment. And there was an indication that the reason of death was related to the virus. We're investigating the prevalence of these comorbidities to this end.
And Cuba commemorates on Saturday, July 30th, the Day of Martyrs of the Revolution, in honor to 2 young men murdered by the Fulgencio Batista dictatorship in 1957. On the occasion of the date, citizens carried out a number of activities throughout the country to pay tribute and show respect to those who offered their lives to help the nation's true independence. The date was enacted by the Council of Ministers after the triumph of the Cuban Revolution to honor 2 young men, Raúl Pujol and Frank Pais, the latter being the chief of action and sabotage of the 26th of July movement, whose burial became a popular demonstration against the abuses of the military dictatorship. The date also commemorates the over 20,000 Cubans who lost their lives in the effort to overthrow the dictator Fulgencio Batista. In Argentina, agricultural producers and the government are involved in a dispute over the liquidation of stored grains, estimated to be worth $18 billion. While international grain prices are soaring due to the war in Ukraine, Argentinian farmers are withholding their soybean stock to avoid the high taxation of the dollar exchange rate, thus preventing the profits expected by the government from taxes on exports. From the government house, they state that speculators in the rural sector deprive the country of the export dollars that the country needs so much. Meanwhile, producers have pointed out the lack of profitability due to the exchange rate mismatch as the reason for the saving of this year's harvest.
Neighboring countries pay soybeans at $540 a ton, and farmers sell and receive dollar. But in Argentina, we charge $140 paid in pesos a ton. One wonders, it isn't going to change? We are waiting for that. Why not Argentina? Today, what is killing us is the exchange restriction. We don't care about taxes anymore. The exchange restrictions are terrible.
Guatemala security forces arrested on Friday journalist José Rubén Zamora Marroquín, the president and the founder of the newspaper El Periódico. Zamora was detained in his home along with several family members for more than 6 hours after the raids on his home by the National Civil Police and the Public Prosecutor's Office. The media outlets' offices were also searched. The journalist is one of the main critics of Alejandro Giammatei's government, and his arrest comes 5 days after strong denunciations of several officials and former officials for corruption in Sunday's section of the newspaper. According to the public ministry, Zamora was arrested for the crimes of blackmail, influence trafficking, and money laundering.
They raided the house. They were in the house for 4 or 5 hours. They only took my wife's cell phone and mine. I have no idea what this is about.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. In Bolivia, social movements gathered in the Unity Pact announced that they will call for countermarches if blockades, if pressure actions from Santa Cruz persist under the excuse of delaying the national census. In a press conference at the People's House, the Executive Secretary of Bolivia's Central Labor Union, the COB, Juan Carlos Huarachi, said that the Unity Pact met this Friday with President Luis Arce and the Vice President David Choquehuanca. Huarachi said that during the meeting, they highlighted the importance of carrying out an absolutely technical and responsible census process. Therefore, they call on the representatives of Santa Cruz to reflect and focus on unity, but also warned they will not allow them to politicize the population and the census, nor will they allow them to affect the workers, the merchants, transporters, and all those who are part of the economic and productive reconstruction of the country. The United States House of Representatives has passed a bill that will ban assault weapons for the first time in decades, in response to a series of mass shootings that shocked the country. The legislation was approved by a 217 to 213 vote in the Democrat majority House. All but 2 Republicans voted against it, joined by a handful of Democrats. The bill will ban the sale, import, manufacture, or transfer of certain semi-automatic weapons. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the legislation a crucial step in the ongoing fight against the deadly epidemic of gun violence in the nation. The latest effort at gun control followed 2 mass shootings in May that shocked the country. The shooting of 10 African Americans at a supermarket in Buffalo by white supremacists, and the murder of 19 children and the 2 teachers at a school in Uvalde by an 18-year-old gunman. In the United States, several states report increasing cases of smallpox and denounced shortages of smallpox vaccines. New York State authorities declare an emergency after reporting over 1,200 cases of smallpox in the city, making the state the epicenter of the disease in the country, which already has about 5,000 cases. The state authorities requested some 110,000 additional doses to treat the emergency in the city. Meanwhile, San Francisco City authorities proclaimed an emergency after reaching 261 cases out of the almost 800 reported in the state of California. The city had to close its main vaccination clinic due to shortages of smallpox vaccine doses. The President of the United States, Joe Biden, tested positive for COVID-19 once again, according to a White House on Saturday. The President's physician, Kevin O'Connor, confirmed it was a rebound case and that the head of state has no reemergence of symptoms and will remain in isolation. Biden began taking Paxlovid, an antiviral drug designed to reduce the severity of the disease, last Thursday when he first tested positive for the disease. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre stated that Biden continued to carry out all of his duties fully. German humanitarian organization's maritime rescue ships arrived in the port of Taranto in southern Italy in the early hours of Saturday, carrying 438 migrants rescued last week in the Mediterranean Sea in 4 separate operations. The Sea-Watch 3 finally obtained a green flag to safe port from Italian authorities after days spent at sea sweltering in temperatures that reached 40 degrees Celsius. The intense heat had caused the medical evacuation of a pregnant woman, accompanied by her husband and the son, as well as 2 parents and their child with burns. Among the migrants aboard the Sea-Watch 3 were 117 unaccompanied minors and 35 women, 4 of them pregnant. The migrants were currently going through registration and medical care before reaching the first reception structures, officials said on Saturday. And Lincolnshire police on Saturday made an urgent appeal to the public for help in identifying men as part of an investigation into the stabbing of a 9-year-old girl in Boston. Lilia Volutier was playing with her sister on Thursday close to their mother's office when she was killed in broad daylight. Speaking from the scene on Saturday, Chief Superintendent Martin Parker said that police have issued CCTV images of a man they want to question. Parker also said that 2 people initially arrested following the incident have been released. Authorities have urged the public not to approach the men directly, should they come into contact, but to call the police instead. The Pope Francis returned to the Vatican after concluding his apostolic trip to Canada, where he apologized for the abuse inflicted on thousands of indigenous children who attended Catholic residential schools. The Supreme Pontiff arrived at 8 a.m. local time at Leonardo da Vinci Airport and during his return trip sent a message through social networks, stating that the treatment of indigenous school children in Canada was considered genocide. The Pope claimed that he did not use the word during his trip. However, he said he had described it and asked forgiveness for this process. In his message, he also expressed his gratitude to Canadian authorities for their reception and attention. Likewise, he assured that he is in constant prayer for the search of truth to continue in the paths of healing and reconciliation and to sow hope to indigenous and non-indigenous people who wish to live in fraternity.
I did not say the word because it did not come to my mind, but I did describe the genocide, and I asked forgiveness for this process.
The International Organization for Migration reported that 192 people have died in 2022 during their journey through Central American countries in Mexico. The IOM stated that from 2014 to date, more than 1,000 asylum seekers or refugees died while crossing the aforementioned territories, a journey carried out by those who want to get to the United States. According to the Intergovernmental Organization Initiative, Missing Migrants Project, more than 1,000 people while traveling across the Americas in 2021, among them at least 51 children. The agency also noted that more than 700 of such fatalities occur at the border crossing between the U.S. and Mexico. Given the situation, the IOM and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees called on the governments to protect the lives and the rights of people who migrate. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Supporters of Pro-Sadr stormed into Iraq's parliament on Saturday for the second time this week in a deepening political crisis. All this happened months after elections that failed to lead to formation of a government. Demonstrators waved Iraqi flags and pictures of the cleric inside the legislature. Once inside, they declared an open-ended sit-in and claimed they will not leave until their demands were answered. Iraqi security forces initially used tear gas and sound bombs to repel the protesters. demonstrators. They also fired tear gas near the entrance to the Green Zone, home to foreign embassies and other government buildings, as well as parliament. Some protesters on the bridge were injured and carried off by their fellow demonstrators.
We entered the parliament building for the third time to root out the corrupt political parties and militias. We're here to fix Iraq and get it back to its position by the word of people and with God's blessing and our leader, Muqtada al-Sadr. This is a message to the parliament members from the Iraqi people. It's over. The authority of this parliament is over and the power is for the people, and people will decide the destiny.
Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi on Saturday met with his Kyrgyz counterpart Jinbek Kulubayev. China and Kyrgyzstan have agreed to strengthen their comprehensive strategic partnership, Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi said, adding that both countries are committed to building a China-Kyrgyzstan community with a shared future. Wang made the remarks during a press briefing after meeting with Kyrgyz Foreign Minister Jinbek Kulubayev. He also vowed to jointly build the Belt and Road Initiative and deepen mutually beneficial cooperation. He said that China will firmly support all measures taken by Kyrgyzstan to safeguard national sovereignty, security and social stability, and firmly oppose external interference in its internal affairs. The government of Egypt confirmed his objection and rejection of Ethiopia's decision to unilaterally proceed with the filling of the Grand Renaissance Dam, built uphill of the Nile River. In a letter to the Security Council, Egypt's Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry described the unilateral filling as a clear violation of the 2015 Declaration of Principles Agreement and international law. Shoukry stressed that although Egypt has been committed to the need to reach an agreement on the Grand Renaissance Dam that meets the common interests of Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan, it will not tolerate any harm to its rights or the hydraulic security of Egyptian people. In this regard, he asked the Security Council to guarantee the implementation of its presidential statement that compels the three countries to negotiate to reach an agreement on the dam. And in the framework of the Agricultural Summit held in Beirut, Minister of Agriculture for Lebanon, Iraq, Jordan and Syria called for the need to launch an Arab common market to improve trade exchanges and address food shortages in order to achieve food integration, especially in light of the difficulties in the global food crisis. In the final statement of the meeting in Beirut, the ministers underscored the need to set unified models for phytosanitary and veterinary health certificates among the four countries based on international standards. They also emphasized the importance of sharing information on diseases, epidemics, and agricultural disasters, as well as the adoption of joint mechanisms to fight them. They also agreed to cooperate with Arab and international organizations to promote the projects aimed at tackling the effects of climate change on the agricultural sector and improve food security. Also, we have other topics and informations. In Ethiopia, the armed forces eliminated 150 fighters of the extremist militia Al-Shabaab who were trying to infiltrate into the country from Somalia. The head of the deployment of the National Defense Force, Tesfaye Ayale, reported that more than 150 members of the terrorist group were eliminated and the vehicles for the suicide mission were destroyed. ENA agency detailed that the fighters tried to attack an area on the border between the two countries and entered Ethiopia, but their attack, the second in the last few days, was repelled by the Ethiopian military. Al-Shabaab insurgents deployed in Somalia are constantly attacking Somali troops, the African Union mission in Somalia, and UN humanitarian operations. Last Friday, Congolese people held the funeral of demonstrators killed during the protests against the United Nations peacekeeping mission in the country, known by its acronym MONUSCO. According to the government, 15 people have died since the protests began, 12 civilians and 3 blue helmets. However, figures from civil society organizations raise the number of dead to 27, to which they add some 58 wounded. The protests against the UN began last week in several localities in North Kivu and concluded on Monday in the assault and looting of some buildings in the UN in the city of Goma, provincial capital and base operations of many NGOs. The demonstrators reject the intervention mission for considering it inefficient and demand its exit from the country.
We have come to ask this MONUSCO to leave. MONUSCO, as we have always feared, it has used weapons which has caused more than 11 victims. We're digging graves for the dignified burial of these victims who were killed by the MONUSCO forces.
teleSUR English continues to grow and its signal now reaches Europe. You can order it from your cable dealer or tune it yourself. These parameters that you see on the screen are in place since July 1st. Quite soon, further changes will be implemented for the signals in the Middle East and Africa. Now more than ever, the world connects to us and our stories are heard in other farther away nations. This news multi-platform will continue providing truthful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.